Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar of the Sustainable Energy Investment Forum. It's the 10th webinar. It's an anniversary today. We are concluding a series of a webinar organized under this initiative, Sustainable Energy Investment Forum. And we are going to discuss today the experiences in bridging the gap between investors and project developers. We have several presenters. Carlos Sanchez Rivero is going to present some policy context and priorities in order to introduce our discussion. Andy Deacon, who is working for Climate Alliance, our contractor under the SEI Forums initiative, is going to present the experiences of the SEI Forums and explain how to structure the dialogue on sustainable energy finance. We will have a more local national experience with the SEFIPA project in Austria with Katharina Muner-Sammer presenting the SEFIPA platform in Australia. In Spain, the presentation from Fernando Garcia Gutierrez from Deloitte presenting the ENER Invest project, again a platform for sustainable energy financing in Spain. And then we'll conclude this session with a presentation from my colleague Kamila Paquel from EASME, presenting the funding opportunities under the Horizon 2020 program to support further development of national financing platforms. So a presentation of the overall experience of the SEI Forums, to presentation of more local platforms supported by the Horizon 2020 program, and a representation for the future opportunities and possibilities to get funds in order to develop your own initiative. We'll have time for question and answer after each presentation, so we'll make a stop after each presentation and you will have the opportunity to ask questions. But you can send questions all during the proposal, so we receive the question through the system. And so we'll park them and ask them to the presenters after his presentation. So now we're going to start with some policy context and priority with Carlos Sanchez Rivero from GNL.
So thank you, Christoph, and good morning to everyone. So it is a pleasure to be here today presenting in the last SEI Forum webinar of this very successful first phase. And today I will try to talk on the investment challenges that we have for energy efficiency and what are the tools that we have under the policy framework to try to achieve those energy efficiency goals. So let's start with okay. Yeah, so let's start with the challenge for 2030. So as you said, the EU has committed to three very ambitious targets for climate and energy for 2030, in line with the Paris Agreement, that it is cutting 40% greenhouse gases emissions and to have at least a 32% share of renewables, and to achieve the 32.5% of energy savings. So the yearly investment gap, it is estimated between 150 to 200 billion of euros. So yeah, so that means that of course public support will not be sufficient to meet the investment needs. And therefore, we'll need to have not only public funding, but also a substantial participation of the private sector. And so we need, first of all, a very smart policy framework. And then we also need on the public side that the public money is spent effectively, and it is also used as a catalyst for attracting the private investment. Well, now on the long-term view, 2050. Last November, the Commission presented the strategic long-term vision for a prosperous, modern, competitive, and climate-neutral economy. And the strategy shows how Europe can lead the way to climate neutrality by 2050 by investing into realistic and technical solutions, empowering citizens, and aligning action in key areas such as industrial policy, finance, or research, but at the same time ensuring the social fairness for a just transition. So there were 8 strategy options presented in the strategy. What all the different options have in common is that radical transformations are necessary, and that there will be a central role of energy system, buildings, transport, industry, and agriculture. Well, modernizing and decarbonizing the EU economy means significant additional investments. There is an estimate that up to 575 billion per year will be necessary to achieve this decarbonization of the economy by 2050. So that means additional 290 billion compared to the baseline. So the baseline is already high. So that will mean really additional investments. And if we just talk on the residential sector, it is in the range of 200 to 230 billion per year of investments. And the vast majority of that will be energy efficiency. Well, the Commission defines 7 different building blocks, where energy efficiency is the building block first, so it is playing definitely a central role. So energy consumption should be reduced by as much as half in the 2050 compared to the baseline of 2005. The building sector is key, and to really higher renovation rates will be necessary. And so that requires both from the supply side to have adequate financial instruments, and on the demand side that they have the consumer engagement that can really sustain these renovation rates. Well, to address those challenges that I've commented for 2020 already, and but 2030 and 2050, we have 4 areas of action identified. 3 of them relates to the 3 pillars of the Smart Finance for Smart Building initiative, but I will focus today more on the regulatory framework. We have a reinforced policy regulatory framework. The EPBD was revised and entering into force last year, July, where with a very reinforced long-term renovation strategies with a strong finance aspect. The Energy Efficiency Directive also was revised last December, where the target, as been already mentioned, was set, and where the energy savings obligation were extended for the period 21 to 30. And we also have the revised and new eco-design and energy labeling regulations that it is expected that they will publish in the journal in July. And yeah, so that will be the policy framework at EU level. After that, it is coming the implementation that should occur at national level. Well, just turning into the EPBD, and in particular, I'm going to talk a bit on the long-term renovation strategies. So this, as I said, the strengthen the long-term renovation strategies have definitely a key role to contribute to achieve our, medium-term and long-term EU challenges for energy efficiency. Well, regarding the strategies under the new Article 2A of the revised EPBD, member states have to establish comprehensive strategies with 2 objectives, and at having the decarbonized building stock by 2050, and secondly, for a cost-effective transformation of existing buildings into nearly zero energy buildings. So there is also an obligation for member states to set up a roadmap with measures and with measurable progress indicators. That's important that could be measurable, and the indicative milestones for 2030, 40, and 50. There is also an obligation that I will now talk a bit more in detail to carry out the public consultation on the strategies, before the submission to the Commission of the strategy, but also during the implementation of the strategy. So yeah, now let me highlight two of the aspects of the long-term renovation strategies. First of all, the public consultations, and later the reinforced financial component. So on the public consultations under Article 285, Member States has to carry out public consultations with the objective to support the development of its long-term renovation strategy. The results of this consultation should be annexed to the long-term renovation strategy. And it is important to highlight that the idea is that the different modalities for consultation has to be set in an inclusive way to involve all the relevant stakeholders. Well, on the format, whether it is an open or targeted consultation, and how to implement the consultation, whether it is face-to-face meetings, events, written submissions, online questionnaire, it is to be decided by the member states, and it is expected that different member states will take definitely different approaches. Well, I said that these public consultations has to be part of the planning phase and the drafting phase of the long-term renovation strategies, but also be part of the implementation phase. And these public consultations during the implementation of the long-term renovation strategies, we see that it is an opportunity for member states to respond to the progress and to try to address the identified gaps. And also, as an alternative during the implementation, I would like to also mention that there is another recommendation from the Commission that these member states may also consider setting up this as a stakeholder platform. Well, I'm coming to the end of my presentation, and I would like to have a couple of words on the reinforced financing side of the long-term renovation strategies. So there is an obligation for member states to support the mobilization of investments and to facilitate access to appropriate mechanisms for the aggregation of projects with the objective to enable investor access, the reduction of the perceived risk of energy efficiency operations. Well, the use of public funding to leverage additional private sector investment and to address the market failures. Well, guiding investments into energy efficiency public building stock in line with the published Eurostat guidance. And finally, also very important point on the advisory tools and the promotion of one-stop shops and some other energy advisory services. Well, yeah, on the timings, I'd like to highlight that the first long-term renovation strategy will be submitted by 10th of March 2020, and I will also like to highlight and take the opportunity to make also the link with the integrated national energy and climate plans. So, because as it is said, the long-term renovation strategies are included in this integrated national energy and climate plans. And as you know, these plans were submitted initially, first draft by the member states by 31st December last year, and last week on the 18th of June, Commission published the communication assessing all these 28 drafts, national energy and climate plans as a whole, and together with the specific recommendations, and basically raising and trying to enforce to inform that there is a need to raise the ambition of the plans as a whole. And well, that was I think the different aspects that I wanted to cover with my presentation. So again, thank you very much. And
thank you very much, Carlos. We do have time for a few question and answer. You can send your questions through the system. You can write your question and we can receive them here. I already have one first question. Feel free to ask more. The question is on: are there prescriptive steps to decarbonize building stock, or is it up to each member state?
Well, it is. I think it is more in connection to the long-term renovation strategies. And as I said, that the EU has set the policy framework, but then it is implementation has to come to the member state level. And of course, the drafting of the long-term renovation strategies with recommendations from the Commission and under the EU framework. But it is up to the member states. It is important that member states has flexibility to implement and to define and to plan how to decarbonize within stock.
Thank you. So we don't have any more questions, so we'll pass to the second speaker. There is actually a question on whether or not we could share a camera, but unfortunately we don't have the camera installed here, and we are not all in the same room. So that's a shame, but we won't be able to see our faces for today. So we'll pass to the second presentation with Andy Deacon from Climate Alliance, who will present the SEI Forums initiative.
Thank you, Christophe, and good morning, everybody. I just would like to take a few minutes to say a little bit about some of the findings from working across now 13 different member states, a series of policy-focused events in Brussels, through the series of Sustainable Energy Investment Forums events that have been taking place over the past 3 years. And this presentation is really given on behalf of a delivery consortium of 3 partners comprising Climate Alliance, Energy Consulting Network, ECN, based in Denmark, and communications agency Praxis, also based here in Brussels, who have been working together to deliver this series of events. So what are the forums and what were they trying to do? So they were launched by EASME back in 2015 with the aim of enhancing capacity and cooperation between public and private stakeholders to develop large-scale investment programs and financing schemes. So the idea behind the forums was to try to bring together the public authorities at national, regional, excuse me, and local level, and to match them up with stakeholders from the private sector, with a particular focus on the investment community, but also looking at the renovation supply chain, energy services companies, and consultants and project promoters to bring those 2 sides of the equation together, and to support implementation of Commission policy. And I'll say something more about that in just a moment. The program of events typically repeated a pattern in each of the member states that we went to, with an initial much larger public conference with multiple parallel sessions covering a range of topics that we'll say a little bit more about in a moment, and much more focused on presentations, exchange of good practice, bringing in case studies from other member states, with those events typically being followed up anything between 6 and 12 months later by a national roundtable discussion, which was much more focused, typically a smaller invite-only audience, with the aim of having people literally sitting around a table and debating in quite some detail the nature of specific barriers to leveraging more energy efficiency investment. In addition to that, as I mentioned, there were some policy-focused events in Brussels, including joint energy efficiency finance marketplace events with the Covenant of Mayors, and also then a series of webinars, as Christophe noted, of which this is the 10th. All of the presentations from that series of events, a set of proceedings in the national language and in English, and the recordings from the webinars are all available on the Sustainable Energy Investment Forums website, And the address for that is the final slide of my part of this presentation. So when we send the slides around, you'll be able to click straight through that link and access all of that material. So the list of member states, I won't read them out, but basically you can see those in the darker colors are where there have been both a public conference and either one round table or two, and basically the darker the color, the more events that have taken place. So as you can see, reasonably good coverage across Europe, and the contract will go on into a second phase, and the intention is to go to even more member states in that next phase of activity. So what have we learned from some of these events? Well, the idea was to support the implementation of the Commission's Smart Finance for Smart Buildings initiative, which you've heard a little bit about already, and the three pillars of that policy. So the events have typically included sessions on de-risking energy efficiency investment. We've also had sessions in multiple of the national roundtables on leveraging and maximizing that leverage for available public funding, and also looking at the way in which EU structural funds are being not only allocated, but also drawn down and deployed. And we've had sessions specifically looking at aggregation and technical assistance, including other European funding programs like ENER, project development assistance, and others, but those have tended to be focused in particular sectoral sessions, for example, programs on home renovation and support for the SME sector, where there has been a particular focus for the use of EU structural funds. So some key sets of key findings, and these are split up for different sectoral audiences. So firstly, on the financial instruments, there's a lot of interest in benchmarking, aggregation, and standardization. Different aspects to each of these. So for benchmarking, to understand for new projects, how they compare to other, for example, building renovation programs or industrial improvement programs, and to start to assess whether investment is really delivering outcomes that are kind of up to standard or comparable with what's happening on other projects. For aggregation and standardization, it's tended to be about overcoming the well-known and reasonably well-understood barrier around the size of energy efficiency projects, in some cases, compared to those for renewable energy, and a desire to reach bundles or portfolios of projects that are of sufficient interest to financial institutions. And projects such as the Investor Confidence Project, work supported through the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group, EFIG, on their underwriting and de-risking toolkit, and others have been a common feature at the SEI Forums events, but there is definitely scope for further activity in that area in pretty much all of the member states that we visited. Then there's increasing interest in diverting support away from potentially direct support for the costs of energy efficiency improvement measures. So for example, typically running 100% grant support programs into risk sharing instruments, and in particular the role of guarantee funds in underwriting financial risk and lowering the cost of borrowing for public authorities at national, regional and local level is of interest. And this is in particular to support the growth of the energy services market in the non-domestic building sector, as well as supporting portfolios of home renovation loans. So this is about kind of using available financing differently, and trying to move away from 100% grant supported programs, but using available public funding to lower the cost of finance, for example, to result in the same ends in making improvement measures cheaper. There is concern from both the financial sector, from public authorities, and from some parts of the energy services sector about the perceived performance gap on energy renovation and improvement measures. And in particular, where there is financial repayments that are linked to future energy bill savings, and where those schemes are not underwritten by some form of energy performance contract or performance guarantee. And the perception that improvement schemes will not deliver 100% of the savings that are promised or technically assessed in some cases means that finance is not always forthcoming. And so there may be roles for smart technology, ongoing real-time monitoring and measurement of performance on buildings, and links to the digital side of what Smart Finance for Smart Buildings is doing, but again also linked to the benchmarking issues around expected improvements in performance. And then finally, for those authorities dealing with structural funds, typically from the public sector side at national and regional level, there's general appreciation of the need to move from grant-only funding regimes to more use of innovative financial instruments, but it's not always clear how those should be structured. So in which sectors, with which financial institutions, and indeed how different forms of European funds can be blended together, and the right level to set to make that transition from grant to loan or grant to guarantee based funding is not always clear. And the impression from the series of events is that there is a lot more work to do in understanding how that might work. Then on home renovation, there is a real interest and desire to understand and to implement integrated end-to-end home renovation services. So typically those that are bundling together technical, financial, after-sales service, support for energy poor communities and so on. But the long-term business model outside of available public funding support is not always clear. And the question of who pays and how can services be developed that aren't overly costly remains a key point to address. But that kind of one-stop shop approach and concept is gaining traction. At the end of 2018, the EU's Joint Research Centre produced a report giving an overview of one-stop shop schemes across Europe, but there's more that can be done to share the findings of that review and to share best practice case studies that are working and delivering on the ground and looking at how they've overcome specific barriers to action. Then when it comes to multifamily apartment blocks, there are still particular legal and financial issues to overcome when lending to multifamily apartment blocks, particular issues around lending to groups of people rather than having direct access to repayments from each individual owner within a block, around collective decision making and the kind of percentage of majority within a block that's needed to make a decision to go ahead and renovate, and to deal with individual householders, perhaps with credit issues within blocks that would like to go ahead and undertake renovation works. And there are a number of studies, some supported through the Horizon 2020 program, that are starting to look in more detail and to try to address those barriers. And then finally, on home renovation, the green mortgage concept is gaining traction and is really of interest in multiple member states. It's not only that, but also the linked project EDAP that's working on data around lending to individual households and linking that to energy performance, has the potential to be really transformative and to gather huge volumes of data relatively quickly, and definitely one to keep an eye on, and to return to perhaps again in future webinars, and certainly in SEI Forums events in different member states. On public buildings, then project delivery units such as Renowat in the city of Liège and Refit in London are of interest to many other authorities to learn and understand how they've worked, how they've assessed portfolios of opportunity, how they've undertaken the public procurement exercises to appoint energy services providers, really of interest. But the concept of an energy services company is being interpreted in many different ways in different member states though, and there are still some issues about the ability to use public procurement to specify performance-based outcomes and to deliver performance-based contracting, and in particular over very long, 20-year plus time periods, and looking at those contract length and performance risk issues will be something also to continue to be addressed in future. Clearly Eurostat and EIB have been working together after the changes to the Eurostat accounting rules around use of off-balance sheet finance and the associated Eurostat and EIB guidance. There's a lot of interest in exploring how that could be used and an appetite to accelerate action, but also a certain degree of skepticism about what's currently possible given some of those procurement and tendering restrictions from the public sector side. So I think once one or two people have started doing it, the opportunity to share again those case studies and the experience of working with off-balance sheet financing where that's been used will be very interesting to share. And if you want more detail on that, there is a recording of a previous SEI Forums webinar that went into quite some detail on the changes within the guidance and how that can be used. On SMEs and industry, still a lot of interest in understanding the SME sector audience in particular, dividing it up and segmenting it, and still a lot of interest in ways to reach out and really engage the SME sector in energy efficiency savings. That said, from the financial sector side, at a number of events, we heard that cash flow considerations and concerns about the ability of small businesses to repay potentially long-term energy efficiency investment loans would be the real driver to the investment decision making. So what we've typically seen is a focus on much shorter term, less than 3-year payback projects, which typically result in lower overall levels of energy savings. And perhaps there's a potential role for guarantee funds in that specific sector. So a whole series of events, reports available, as I say, in national language as well as English, all of the individual presentations from the parallel sessions that have led us to be able to make that analysis across multiple member states are all available at the web address you see there, and you'll be able to click through from the slides. Apologies, it's a slightly long URL. There will be a next phase of the contract that will get underway in 2019. You can follow the hashtag SEI Forums on social media if you're a Twitter user, and if you're a user of LinkedIn, there is an SEI Forums LinkedIn group, and if you're not already in it, you can go online via LinkedIn and request to join that. There are people on there sharing information, certainly, and once we know more about the upcoming series of events, then we'll announce that via social media and on that group. So please stay in touch for further phases of activity. And back to Christoph.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you. We have a little time for some question and answer before we go to Vienna. So feel free to ask also through the system, and I shall remind also that the questions we received and we cannot answer live, we receive an answer afterwards via email. So I would just take the two short question on whether there will be the PowerPoint available. So it will be available at this address at the website for the SEI Forums. And also there is a question on where to access the GSC overview report. So I think Googling GSC one-stop shop may find something, and in any case we can find and send the information for you after this webinar. So question for Andy, was there any specific messaging for engaging citizens on better energy homes and financing that came out of the forums?
Yes, so a couple of interesting specific examples to mention. From the series of events in Italy, there were a couple of interesting examples. So in the city of Parma, an EU-supported scheme ran to try to engage homeowners, and they worked with a local bank, Parma, to establish what they thought was an attractive financing offer, but then the demand didn't come. So I think the lesson there was that establishing the financing scheme and expecting householders to come was not necessarily enough on its own. And what we have seen is that some of those more integrated and holistic one-stop shop type approaches have reached greater numbers and have had greater impact. And there is two previous SEI Forums webinars on home renovation. One covered the Picardy Pass scheme, which is very interesting, and the material there is worth reviewing. And one of the others heard from a scheme called Rijmarkt in the Netherlands, which again, taking a very integrated, holistic approach, and they've actually really set up shops, in some cases, in town centres to act as engagement points for citizens, but also been very clear in trying to make attractive marketing to really reach out and engage on quality of life issues beyond just trying to sell energy efficiency as energy efficiency. And I think that's starting to emerge as a key message as well, is talking to householders in languages other than the technical speak that we sometimes too easily fall into.
I take a second question before we move on. Any update on clarity around what the EMAP model is becoming? On my sorry, I missed the question. Any update on clarity around what the EMAP green mortgages financial model might be?
Oh,
do you want to? Do you have the information, or shall we?
So again, in the same way as we can add the link to the JRC report to this set of slides, then we can add the latest information from the EMAP project. They produced now a white paper, a set of market assessments in different member states, some of which we've shared on previous SEI Forums webinars. So there's material that's out in the public domain, and my understanding is there's now ongoing series of discussions with financial institutions to work out what the final financial model might be. So I think it's a bit of a stay tuned on that one as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we need to move on to the next presenter. There was still a question on the Eurostat guidance. We'll answer by email. Just to remind that Andy mentioned we had a specific webinar on a specific topic of the Eurostat guidance. So you may also have a look at the SEI Forums webpage and look at this webinar, which is available online, either the recording and the presentations. So now we're going to move to Vienna with Katharina Muner-Sammer from ÖGUT, presenting the
Good morning. My name is Katharina.
Project.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. I will mute
Okay.
my microphone.
Yes, okay. Good morning. My name is Katharina Muner-Sammer, and together with my colleague Gerhard Bayer, we were delighted to present the SEFIPA project, the Sustainable Energy Financing Platform Austria. We are both from the Austrian Society for Environment and Technology in Vienna. The SEFIPA project itself lasted 3 years, and we are now in the finalizing reporting phase. Please move to the next slide. Or can I? Okay, thank you. At the beginning, I'd just like to give you some brief background information about the consortium. It's a quite it's a quite special for an EU project because it consists only of 2 partners, the Austrian Society for Environment and Technology, and our partner is also situated in Vienna. It's the Energy Changes. So now, please, next slide. The SEFIPA project itself was designed as an action-oriented platform to collect, develop, implement, and disseminate innovative ideas to accelerate finance for sustainable energy. The overall concept of SEFIPA was to bring together a selected group of experts from relevant stakeholder institutions like public administration, financial sector, business and consumer associations. And in finance labs, these experts worked on new financing instruments and changes to the existing regulatory framework. And the final results are real and additional investments in sustainable energy. You can find our final SEFIPA results on our website. Today, we would like to present a selection of SEFIPA results. We have chosen the following SEFIPA results for this presentation, beginning, please, next slide. Beginning with the implementation of our crowd investing platform for sustainable energy. Secondly, we would like to talk about how we promoted sustainable real estate funds in Austria. And then we will look at heat supply contracting for blocks and buildings. And finally, we will talk about photovoltaic at multifamily houses by own consumption. So let's start with the Crowd for Energy crowd investing platform. Within the scope of SEFIPA, the crowd investing platform for sustainable energy projects has been built up. The financial instrument chosen is the subordinated loan. And we are looking to projects in the field of sustainable energy like e-mobility, PV on rooftops, energy efficiency projects, etc. There exists some experience on alternative financing for renewable energy projects, but it is quite new for energy efficiency projects. The selection criteria for the projects are the project should be sustainable energy projects with a proven technology. All permits should be obtained, and we need a clear business plan, including cash flow projections, so that there's a minimum risk for the investor. The Crowd for Energy crowd investing platform is active in Austria and Germany, and the investment volume should be between 50,000 and to 300,000 euro in the first phase. The minimum investment per investment has been set at 250 euro. Since the start of the platform, 3 projects are successfully financed. Firstly, a small hydropower plant was financed to the tune of 300,000 euro by individual investors from Austria and Germany. The offer to the investors from Austria was a subordinated loan at 4.5% interest rate per annum for the duration of 5 years. The other successfully financed projects are a rooftop photovoltaic project and a biogas plant. All details of the campaigns can be found at the Crowd for Energy website. In general, it is quite easy to find investors for a good project. It is more difficult to find suitable projects. So now I would like to move on to sustainable real estate funds. This is another financing instrument I would like to introduce. In Austria, investors have shown increasing interest in sustainable real estate funds. On the other hand, there exists the Austrian eco-label for financial funds since 2004, and since 2017, the label can also be applied for sustainable real estate funds. This label plays a pioneering role in sustainable finance. However, it is not so easy to fulfill the criteria of the eco-label for sustainable real estate funds. So we advise the real estate funds applying sustainability criteria for the buildings. The buildings of sustainable real estate funds have to fulfill the Austrian standard for buildings climate active. And we have we were very successful. 2 funds which we advised. One is already certified with the Austrian eco-label, and another one will introduce the Austrian eco-label this year or maybe in the beginning of next year. And a further result was that we worked on further guidelines how to make buildings in real estate funds more energy efficient. Now I will pass over to my colleague Gerhard, who will talk about 2 further highlights of the SEFIPA project.
Sorry, Gerhard, you need to unmute your microphone. It's muted from your side. You can please unmute the microphone. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So good morning also from my side. My name is Gerhard Bayer from ÖGUT. Greetings also from hot Vienna. Yesterday we had 38 degrees, and that's a good time now to speak about heat supply contracting. I would like to tell about the pilot project we carried out within SEFIPA. It was a heat supply contracting for a whole block of buildings in Vienna. It's existing buildings with old houses. There was also already the technical solution with thermal retrofitting, seasonal heat storage by deep drilling, solar heat pumps, and altogether it was a quite sustainable solution with a seasonal performance factor larger than 6. There was also the organizational solution that several houses will join a kind of energy community and supply their heat demand together. But what was missing, and that's I think the interesting point for SEFIPA, the missing was a suitable business model for investing and operating. And one of the reasons why this business model was missing is the situation in Austria, and I think in many other European countries, that there are split incentives of tenant and landlord. And please, I would ask you to show the next slide. And please, the next slide. Yes, thank you. Some facts of the pilot project: 18 houses altogether. In the phase 1, 6 buildings were participating, and the construction has already started in spring 2018. 85% of energy savings, and during SEFIPA we supported the building owners by the bid invitation. 5 contractors submitted an offer, and the best offer started the construction. Please, the next slide. Thank you. In this graph, you can see the split incentive. We analyzed 3 options for the building owner. The first option you can see on the left side, the left bar, is to install again natural gas heating. The second was to connect on the municipal district heating system, and the third bar, you can see the sustainable solution with geothermal, solar, and heat pump. And you can see altogether the sustainable energy solution is the cheapest, and we calculated it by full costs, what means all costs together, investing costs, maintenance, service, operating costs, during a period of 20 years. And we calculated it in euro per square meter and year. Even the sustainable solution is the cheapest. You could see, if you look on the blue parts of the costs, for the landlord, the blue part is the cost for the landlord, the owner. This solution is the most expensive. And in Austria, the landlord, and I think in many other countries, decide which heating system will be installed. So we had the problem of conflict of interest, and there we developed, or we did not develop a new system, but we adapted a heat supply contracting model for this block. And on the right side, the right bar, you can see how the same total costs have been distributed in another way, so that both parties, tenants and landlords, have an advantage, and so we could achieve that the project has been implemented. Next slide, please. Some conclusion of this pilot project: the full costs of different heating systems are totally unknown by landlords and tenants. Most of them consider only a part of the costs. For example, boiler service and maintenance are mostly not considered. The business model heat supply contracting is also unknown at small private building owners. The heat supply contracting can solve the split incentive, and the sustainable energy system is cheaper than district heating and natural gas if you consider the full costs of 20 years, and I think also in these days, if you consider the options of cooling of buildings. Next slide, please. Another example, what we achieved in SEFIPA was we was financing PV plants on multi-family houses, and the idea was that if you have a multi-family house and you install a joint PV on the roof, for example, that all households under the roof can participate and benefit from the plant. And there we developed a suggestion for amendment of the Austrian electricity law, and we had very intensive discussions with political decision maker and tried to convince them. And in June 2017, this amendment has been implemented, and we started a wide information platform and advisory service for pilot projects. And I think at the status now, we have more than 50 implemented pilot projects in Austria. Next slide, please. So the solution was all households in a multifamily house can use PV electricity as own consumption, and that works in this way that the network operator automatically subtracts the aliquot PV contingent in kilowatt hours for each household if on their electricity bill. And as mentioned, we made a broad information campaign about these new opportunities for the target groups like building owners, property manager, housing association, tenants. And you can see this information platform on www.pv-gemeinschaft.at. As the target group is Austria, so I have to say it's only in German, but maybe we think about translating the website. We also elaborated 5 business models for investors how to finance such a joint PV plant. So next, please. Next slide. So I came to the end of my presentations. Would like to thank you for your attention, and our contact data you can see here. And if you would like to contact us, don't hesitate and contact us. Thank you very much.
Kamila, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for connecting and reconnecting. I'm very happy to tell you today about a new topic that we have within Horizon 2020. My name is Kamila Paquel, and I'm a project advisor at EASME, which is the executive branch of the European Commission. We deal predominantly with energy efficiency in our unit and distributed renewables. When we talk about sustainable investment, for instance, as you heard also from Andy, Deacon, and the Sustainable Energy Investment Forum, we are predominantly focusing on energy efficiency and distributed renewable energy sources. The Sustainable Energy Investment Forum initiative was and is a success, and we see that there is really a great potential in these kinds of events and capacity buildings. This was recognized by the European Commission and by the member states, and they decided to add a new topic to the Horizon 2020 program. So there is still, well, we have 2 years to go, and the first call will open soon. And the title is National Roundtables to Implement the Smart Finance for Smart Buildings Initiative. I will walk you through what it includes. So it is this new topic. We have a new call that is opening very soon. So you can see that it will open mid-July, and with the deadline for submission of proposals mid-January next year. We are also planning on the second call that is aligned with the annual calls that you may be familiar with other topics. So this call will open in March next year, and with the deadline in September next year as well. The budget that is allocated to this initiative or this opportunity is €3 million for the next call. And the estimated or suggested value of a grant that you may request is between €500,000 and €1.5 million. However, there is also a scope to request other amounts of money if it's well justified. So there is no limitation on eligibility and on basically selectability as well, because these two elements play a role in assessment of your proposals. as you, there are basically three things that you may want to know if you are if you're interested in having EU support to stimulate dialogue between different stakeholders and help the European Commission and the member states to implement smart financing for smart buildings initiative, as Carlos, our colleague from DG ENER, has explained. There is a challenge that the money under Horizon 2020 wants to address. There is a scope, so there is everything that is eligible for funding, and this is how you can structure your proposals, basically addressing the challenge and keeping your proposal within the scope that I will shortly present. And then there are impacts, and impacts are very important for us because, of course, we want to make sure that the EU money, which is basically your money and the taxpayers' money, is well spent. So we want to know that every grant brings about significant impacts that are not only on paper, but they are real and they are well justified and but based on a solid and robust baselines. The challenge is everything that Smart Financing for Smart Buildings initiative tries to address. So basically, we need to have a more private money channeled into energy efficiency investment. This includes different private funding sources, including shifting of the financial flows on the secondary markets, but it can be also structuring private finance on a very local level. So it is a very broad definition of what private finance means for a very broad challenge, which is basically the investment gap in energy efficiency that we know is reaching, or it is really impressive to see how much money needs to be still invested from private sector in order to reach our climate goals by 2030, by 2050. We know that energy efficiency investment is not yet very attractive on the for the financiers, and they represent high transaction costs. So the scope would be also to support aggregation, standardization, assistance for project development, and of course collecting data. This is if you participated in our EU Sustainable Energy Week recently, you would hear it in almost every session that we should just try to connect the data about the benefits on energy savings, on cost savings, but also on non-energy benefits such as increased comfort, higher productivity of energy efficient buildings, and there can be other non-energy benefits from different branches. So basically this is the challenge we're talking here about, but as you will see, the roundtables that the money that is now available wants to support is wider than buildings, and you can have a discussion that is much broader. The challenge here is just, if you look at the right side of the slides, this graph is just showing that we need to enhance understanding between different stakeholders groups that are key to leveraging private finance and making just better use of public funds that are available currently. These are public authorities, project developers, users, homeowners, private finance providers, and quality assurers and valuators. So the universe of energy efficiency finance is quite broad, and there is no limitation to who you would like to involve, as long as it makes sense from the perspective of the objective of this funding opportunity, or funding topic as we call it. In terms of scope, the funds are available for setting up of national roundtables that are focused on energy efficiency investment, and it should be a permanent multilateral discussion forum. So you have to have more than one stakeholder here in order to conduct a meaningful discussion. And it should be something that is permanent, so that there is some kind of a cycle or sequence of events that can lead to something tangible and constructive. The relevant stakeholders were already named. Here you have an example, so a list that is not restricted to only what you see on the slide. We talk about government, and don't think only about Ministry of Energy, for instance. Please think about all other relevant ministries that are managing public funds, that are also involved in regional development or in technology promotion. So all those branches of government that may be relevant. Local and regional authorities, as we know, they are playing a key role, and basically the energy efficiency investment will only happen if there are good agreements between the central level of governance and the local and regional levels. So this is how the dialogue should be structured, and we consider local and regional authorities to be of key importance here. Financial sector is, of course, a must, as you heard previously. The needs to engage them are higher than ever. The ESCOs, other project developers, performance assurers, homeowners, it's not an easy group to target, but it is incredibly important to engage them in order to get their consent, in order to get the sometimes money, sometimes just a signature, but there is quite a lot of engagement that needs to happen, and including capacity building, awareness raising with this group of stakeholders. Industry sector can be targeted, of course, and this is also your call, how you want to engage with them. It can be national roundtables focusing on industry, but it can be broader than that. Construction sector is key, of course, whether that's buildings and or just basically any investment. We need the right skill force. So this kind of stakeholders also matter very much, and of course SME sector quite broadly understood. You can add to this list with relevant stakeholders if you think of any, so this is not an exhaustive list. Focus on existing private and public buildings is expected, industry and SMEs, but there could be also other elements to the debate, discussion, capacity building, such as renovation of street lighting, district heating, transport infrastructure, or a combination of all of these, if you think of a holistic approach. But it can be also much more targeted than just having a holistic approach to the dialogue. Energy efficiency measures as the focus. As I mentioned, this is what we are doing at our agency and with the Horizon 2020 part, but also the integrated renewable sources, if they are part of a wider energy efficient refurbishment or intervention in general. What is the hope behind this funding opportunity is that the roundtables is not only a meeting place, a platform for stakeholders to gather, to exchange, but it is also quite concrete in terms of what these kinds of discussions could lead to. So basically the discussions could be targeting analysis of possibilities to upscale existing best practices from the national and European level. So this is basically linking to the good practices, best practices examples as those we've heard from SEFIPA, for instance. There are many others, not only Horizon 2020, but Horizon 2020 has been successful in triggering quite a lot of good action that is relevant. So you might be interested also in seeing different projects that go into that direction. Develop strategies, roadmaps, and action plans. This is, of course, easier said than done. But if you have all the stakeholders I mentioned on the previous slide in the room, you can think of something very exciting and quite binding. Even if it's only a strategy or roadmap, an action plan, it can actually underpin the national legislation, and by this also help implementation of the EU policy and legislation. Proposed improvements in the national policy frameworks. We all know they are not always all perfect. So this is a scope to exchange and to propose constructive measures and changes to what may be still improved. Of course, ideally, as it is a permanent discussion, it would be good to have a follow-up in the implementation of such improvements. Develop jointly template documents, contract leading to a better functioning of the market. As we've heard, one big challenge for energy efficiency investment is lack of standardization. This could be tackled by a joint initiative through the national roundtables. Act as a forum where all stakeholders can really learn from successful market initiatives. So inviting good speakers, inviting practitioners who have reached already some kind of milestone, even if it's not fully at the some even parts of good practices exchanges already very, very helpful. Proposals should build on the activities of the Sustainable Energy Investment Forums. So by all means, please do follow the long URL that Andy was talking about and check all the proceedings or presentations that you may find relevant to your idea. And then the cherry on the cake is that unlike many Horizon 2020 topics, here we have a possibility to accept proposals from only one country. However, there is a small addition to this, is that there should be a small share of activities to exchange with similar roundtables across Europe. And those exchanges will be coordinated by the Commission services. So in the sense, the Commission will help to stimulate this exchange with similar roundtables across Europe. And the impact is establishment of national energy investment roundtables. So if you have established it, as you have already reached one impact, we want also to see a planned number and delivered number of the national regional policy documents resulting from the roundtables, number of key stakeholders involved in the roundtables, in particular from the financial sector. It's not easy to engage them, we know it, and that's why there is EU funding supporting this kind of engagement, because if it's easy, it will not be part of our work program. Investments in sustainable energy triggered by the project and primary energy savings triggered by the project. Additionally, if you wish, you can also quantify your impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions or other air pollutants. There are relevant initiatives. As I mentioned, any successful initiative or project is relevant because this the aim would be to share good practices, but some relevant to directly to the national roundtables are those that you see on the slide. SEFIPA is one of them. You heard about successful projects triggered by the platform, but there are also in a SEFIPA project, for instance, there are finance lab events, so meetings, physical meetings where stakeholders meet and can exchange and network plan for investment. So this is one good practice example. And ENER Invest, I hope we can hear about later on, or if not, you can click on the link on the slide and see what they achieved. Build Interest is another platform where structural dialogue in 3 different countries is pursued, and RESPAM, which is a bit older project, but it was also focusing on implementing, developing and implementing financial instruments for investment in renewable energy in rural areas. I will not repeat the Sustainable Energy Investment Forums, just for as a reminder, this is where we've been so far, and there will be a next phase, or very soon we will have a new events plan for. For any questions, you can always address me or my colleagues by addressing questions at EASME Energy East Europa EU, or your national contact points. If you're at the proposal writing stage, they will have lots of tips and tricks and latest information to support you. It is actually in their best interest that your proposal is successful, and it is in our best interest, all of us, that your proposals are very good, excellent, and hopefully we will meet soon discussing your ideas and implementing them. Thank you very much.